Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to stand for the arrival of His Excellency Governor Ajamu Bailey. I invite you to remain standing for the playing of the St. Maarten song.
Where over the world, say where, you find an island there, so lovely small, with the ancient spring, with people French and Dutch, though talking English much, as we St. Maarten in the sea. Oh, sweet St. Martin's land, so bright by beach and strand, with sailors on the sea and harbors free, where the chains of mountains green, there is me in sunlight sheen. Oh, I love the paradise, nature's beauty very nice. Oh, I love the paradise, nature's beauty very nice.
Thank you. You may be seated. His Excellency Governor Ajamu Bailey, Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Infrastructure and Environment, the Honorable Patrice Gumbs, Members of Parliament Jansen Webster, Roosberg, York, and De Weaver, Second Vice President of the Collectivity of St. Maarten, Ms. Bernadette Davis, Representative of the Netherlands in Philipsburg, Mr. Elko Boomsma, Steering Committee Member, Representative of St. Maarten, Mr. Ronald Hallman, NRPB Director, Mr. Claret Connor, Secretary General of the Ministry of Vermi, Mr. Plazimont, and Secretary General of the Ministry of VSA, Ms. Arnell. Specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and I bid you a good evening. It's always a powerful thing when people come together in one room to talk about the future of our island. Tonight isn't just about presentations or reports. It's about us as a community sitting together to listen, reflect, and share our voices. Moments like this remind us that real change begins here, in the conversations where neighbors, leaders, and families come together with a common purpose. Every voice matters, and every perspective adds value to the path forward. Here is how our evening will unfold. And of course, this never works when you need it to, so someone in the back, if they can move the slide, please. We will hear welcoming remarks from the NRPB Director, Mr. Claret Connor. Following that, we will have words by the Minister of Vermi, who will share government's vision for future waste management in Sint Maarten. We'll then hear about the emergency debris management project interventions. After that, we'll take a short break for refreshments. And when we return, we move into the heart of tonight's program, the presentation of the feasibility study and the environmental and social impact assessments and management plans. Finally, we've reserved a good amount of time for open questions, answers, and dialogue before we move on to close the evening. So once again, welcome. Thank you for being here. And let's begin. With that, I invite the Director of the NRPB, Mr. Claret Connor, forward.
Good evening. Let me begin by thanking everyone for taking the time out to be here tonight. I know many of you have very busy schedules and responsibilities, so your presence shows just how important this issue is to our community. The National Recovery Program Bureau, NRPB, on behalf of the government of Sint Maarten, continues to implement projects through the Sint Maarten Resilience and Recovery Trust Fund. This trust fund is designed to strengthen our resilience as a country. Tonight we turn our attention to one of our island's biggest challenges, waste management, and more specifically, the intervention at the landfill or dump. We all know that waste management is not just a technical challenge. It is something that impacts our daily lives, our health, and our environment. And even how we see ourselves as a nation as well. As it relates to the landfill, or as we would call it, and I just mentioned that, the dump, each of us has opinions, frustrations, and issues with this particular dump. Given the historical context surrounding the landfill, its location within one of our national heritage sites, which is simultaneously a natural treasure, that is a very much given. But we are here tonight not only to have a discussion or share an opinion, but to add science to those discussions and opinions. And this science comes through the studies, the data, the technical knowledge that can help inform our decisions for a better future. This is not the first time that we are having such a gathering. Some of you may have been here in 2022 when the NRPB and the Ministry of ROMI brought together more than 90 stakeholders from government, the private sector, civil society, and community groups to share their ideas on how Sint Maarten should tackle its waste management challenges. Those sessions give us a clear sense of concerns, priorities, and aspirations of the people most directly affected. Tonight is a continuation of that process. We are following up with what we shared, with what was shared then, and how those ideas and perspectives have been taken into account. Some of those discussions you will probably remember from tonight's evening. Excuse me. This session is about moving the conversation forward, guided not just by technical studies, but also your lived experience and input as a community. The Emergency Debris Management Project, EDMP, is not just about resolving Sint Maarten's waste management challenge. It is a building block in laying a foundation for the future. The government has a Waste Vision 2050 that it's presently executing, which sets out the long-term direction of how Sint Maarten will reduce, reuse, recycle, and transition to a safer, more sustainable approach to waste. Our role as NRPB through the project EDMP is to support the vision by providing technical assistance, carrying out feasibility studies, making key initial investments, and by preparing the groundwork for a larger intervention. And then there is the landfill. What makes this moment different from the past is that we would have had plans, visions, and proposals before, but today we also have within EDMP financing, the science and the international standards to enable action. That combination gives us a real opportunity to make lasting impact and change. That is why tonight's session is important. You will hear directly from the government. The NRPB then will expand the conversation by delving into a deeper into the project activities. You will also hear from the experts who will present the findings of the feasibility study and explain the proposed technical approach. This information will add science and evidence to the conversation, helping to inform both our feelings today and our decisions for tomorrow. You see, when building a nation, the choices we face are not always easy, and we know they're not. But change never is. We want our future generations to inherit a Sint Maarten that is healthier, safer, and more sustainable. And these are choices we must face and make together. And I want to be very, very clear. What is presented tonight is not the end game. It is the beginning. With your input and the government leadership, we can take this unique opportunity to turn one of our greatest challenges into the foundation for a cleaner and safer and more resilient Sint Maarten. We have coined the phrase in this project as it will take all of us. And by what I'm seeing here tonight, this is a very encouraging and excellent start. And for that, I say once again, thank you and have a very informative and impactful evening.
Thank you. I would now like to invite the Honorable Minister, Mr. Patrice Gumbs, forward for his presentation.
Good evening, everyone. The future of waste. I want to begin this presentation, and despite, of course, us as a ministry focusing on our future plans, I always think it's very important to give a bit of historical context. So, of course, I want to begin very briefly the evolution of the dump, the landfill. How did we get here? In my far right picture side, you will see a picture of the first filling of the Great Salt Pond. This is 1960s, early 1960s, when the government decided to excavate a large portion of the area known today as Fort William. In so doing, they created what is now commonly referred to as Pondville, so Walton Nisbeth Road, Canagita Street, as well as what we know now as Pond Island. Fast forward, how did we get here? What were the impacts actually of this in the long term? What were the impacts of having a landfill in the center of town? What are the long-term impacts that we faced? Next picture, you see pollution. You see illegal settlements. You see marine die-off. And of course, we are all very much familiar with the history of landfill fires that have haunted almost 2 or 3 generations of us since its existence. Tonight, we're here to discuss how do we move away and how do we grow together. Sint Maarten's solid waste management vision. The ministry, and of course, having said that, the government's primary objective in how they view the future is to facilitate the closure of the landfill and accelerate Sint Maarten's transition towards a circular economy. Our mission is accelerating Sint Maarten's transition to a circular economy by promoting sustainable resource use and driving the strategic closure of the landfill. Now, the first question, of course, on many people's minds, how do we define the closure of the current landfill? The first, of course, access to the landfill in future will be prohibited to the public. In short, the public can no longer, as currently done, go onto the landfill to deposit their garbage. Secondly, a designated institution, and we'll speak more about that in our future slides, is assigned for managing waste processing and diversion. So currently what happens is that the Ministry of ROMI in-house is one tasked with actually managing daily operations at landfill, and we do that, of course, from the national budget. The institution will accelerate the transition to a circular economy and achieve minimum land filling. And I'll go deeper into exactly what circular economies are, and of course, within my presentation and very more extensively in the following presentations, we'll explain exactly what we mean by minimum land filling and how long it will be continuing. And finally, we define closure as a final cover layer will be applied to sections of the landfill that have reached maximum capacity. Sint Maarten Solid Waste Management Vision. The government of Sint Maarten has outlined a vision for integrated solid waste management with the goal that by 2050, Sint Maarten will become a green and clean, sustainable island. The vision aims to establish a circular economy where waste generation is minimized and products and materials are reused as much as possible. So if we look at the graph that's in front of you now, in the first most basic sort of society, one we're currently living in, you have what is called a linear economy. Essentially, people use, people eventually send everything to landfill. We go to the recycling. People use, they make use of some things, and the end, it still ends up in the landfill. The final, the circular economy, which is the most integrated, most progressive, is people use, they reuse again, and you have the most minimal impact or the most minimal amount of waste going to the landfill. In all of these examples, and you notice very clearly, in the end of the day, everything still goes to a landfill. Now, the question, of course, is, Minister, if we're saying we're closing the landfill, how is everything in the best case scenario still going to end up at the landfill? Part of this process, of course, and be explained more in depth in the following slides, is you have a certain amount of time that every single part of the landfill will continue to be used for a certain period until you reach max capacity. Now, of course, there's other solutions to this as well. The circular economy will consist of several key elements. Minimal take, reducing the extraction of raw materials by maximizing the use of existing materials. In short, reuse, reuse, reuse until you can't reuse anymore. What we're currently doing in the landfill is we finish with this plastic bottle, drink it, we toss it in the bin. In a circular economy, the same exact plastic bottle becomes part of road infrastructure. It becomes a plastic bag. And so, again, we reuse. And that becomes 2 or 3 times again before we finally find whatever minimal amount of waste is left and reduce, and that will or can go to the landfill. In addition, producing goods in a way that supports circular economy principles such as sustainable materials and processes, ensuring products are used efficiently and for as long as possible, which includes additional elements, repairing, fixing products to extend their life, refurbishing, restoring old products to a good condition, reuse, using a product, again, for the same or a different purpose than originally intended, recycling, processing materials to make new products, and finally, reducing, striving to generate as little use as possible throughout the life cycle of all products. A key part of this, of course, is how we interact with people who have an interest in waste. A very big and important part of the mindset change is going to be looking not at waste as essentially waste, but waste has a value. And this entire process of this entire project, the landfill future, waste management future, it's actually looking at giving the commodification to waste. Every single thing that we consume should not end up in the landfill. It has an innate value, and the idea is to commodify that. The idea going out of that will be that there's a number of persons who are already locally very much involved in recycling and reprocessing and repurposing these goods, so-called waste. How do we scale that up to the national level? And that's where basically we're going to go with our waste. Secondly, we are also exploring possibilities for high technology uses such as waste to energy. That's something that, of course, we know we have restraints simply because waste to energy can reduce significantly more than things like recycling, can reduce significantly more the volume of waste that goes to the landfill. The challenge, of course, with waste to energy is that you basically need a lot of garbage. This is where you come in with partnerships, and I'm really pleased to have Bernadette Davis here today. We've been having a lot of discussions, not only with the French side, Seba, Stacia, Sint Maarten, Aruba, as well as far as Guadeloupe, in terms of how can we address this collectively. And this all becomes, all this because we all have the similar issue of waste as well as limited capacity and space. And of course, finally, on my last point, one of the key things we have, and you see it in the landfill currently, a large part of what goes into our landfill currently is organic waste. So this is things like your greenery, this is things like your food, and of course, we also have construction debris. All of these things can be used. The idea is the greenery and organic waste can be used towards supporting Ministry of TAUW and the agricultural initiatives. And then, of course, their C&D waste can be repurposed. When we went to Aruba, for example, we noticed a lot of the construction material was broken down, reused to make bricks, or even reused in road applications as well. So, outside of this sort of long-term vision, EDMP as a project as a whole, which is a complement to the bigger waste vision of the government, has a number of disbursement conditions. And why are these disbursement conditions there? One simple reason, sustainability. So the Dutch government, along with the World Bank, also established these conditions that we have to achieve in formulating the project in order to have the certain amount of money disbursed for the intervention, the physical intervention we hear about later on. The first, of course, was establish an interministerial work group on solid waste. Why? Because currently what happens, waste is considered something that VROMI exclusively deals with. In the future, in the waste management future of Sint Maarten, waste has an impact on all ministries and on all persons. That interministerial group's creation is really critical to ensure that when we talk about waste, we don't look at it from the point of view of what's in the dump, we look about it from the point of view of also health, as well as the impact of our economy. So it really has to be across the board, that message of it takes all of us. And that has been achieved already, so that's a really important factor to put out. Institutional structures. One of the big burning questions, and we've been speaking about it for quite some time, has been the role of a waste authority. So as I mentioned earlier, currently everything is done in-house by the Ministry of VROMI. What that means is you don't have somebody independently managing the best ability our current waste stream. One of the criteria is also the establishment of this entity. It's done similarly across most of the Caribbean regions as well, and in how you operate your landfill, how you also operate whatever recycling program and budgets you may have towards waste management. Thirdly, we have an updated draft ordinance. So I remember, oftentimes I'm in press briefing and I get asked the question, Minister, in press briefing and I get asked the question, Minister, why don't we just fine everybody and, charge everybody for the garbage they put out, simply because we don't have it currently legally possible. What is critical in driving the Sint Maarten into the future when it comes to waste management is an updated waste ordinance, establishing definitions, rules, and responsibilities of all stakeholders involved in integrated waste management strategy. That has come along very nicely, and we're actually going to get a draft of the waste ordinance by the end of this year in time to have it debated to the floor of Parliament at the beginning of next year. Then, of course, the big elephant in the room, what is this going to cost? Currently, all waste management operations are handled by the national budget. What this means is that every single year, we, with the Minister of Finance, sit down and have to negotiate how much money can I get to ensure a healthy, sustainable waste management system, as well as to ensure that the country and the island looks clean. It's not a very sustainable way of managing your country, particularly one that's heavily reliant on tourism. So the idea of the financial framework is you're going to create a system, along with, of course, the disposal and tipping fee. You're creating a financial mechanism to fund all of these ideas. This is going to include household contributions. So, for example, it's something that everywhere in the world, except Sint Maarten, people have to independently pay for their waste. It's usually a very small amount. For example, we went to Aruba, it's about 35 to 45 guilders. In other countries, it's slightly more, slightly less. Everyone pays this basically to support the financing of the entire pickup mechanisms as well. Then finally, you of course have your tipping fee. The tipping fee is something that's going to come in at the landfill entrance. Currently, people can enter the landfill free of charge. They're directed to a place, depending on what they're depositing, they have to put it down and they enter and they exit completely free. This, of course, will be managed by an introduction of a weighbridge, something that's commonly used even on the front side as well. You come in, your truck has this amount of weight, you dump, you come back out, it weighs this, so you're paying charge for how much you dump into the landfill. This is also a way to ensure that basically the sustainability in not only necessarily the actual hauling, but also the operations of the entire landfill. Because what's currently happening now, with the limited amount of money we have in the national budget, paid for, of course, by your taxpayers, by your tax money, we have to fund cleanup contracts, we have to manage the entire landfill, and we have to basically out fires, maintenance, and it costs quite a lot. So in the Sint Maarten of the future, we are looking at a very integrated system where we're able to finance a functioning system that works for everybody. So what are the actual goals in a nutshell? Total professional collection of waste, complete landfill reform, solid waste diversion, we spoke very briefly about that. And I think what's very important to highlight here is that we, of course, spent quite a number of dollars and time on cleaning up the Rye. So that special area that everyone has been noticing has been cleaned up. The idea is, one of the parts of the planning is that that area will be designated for future waste diversion. So we're looking at things, for example, as a recycling depot will go there. A concrete debris management system will go there. The greenery will go there. The place where you deposit oil will go there. So it's really trying to integrate in a one-stop area shop the future of how we look at waste. Why? Because let's be honest, the more complicated it is to get rid of your waste, the most likely it is to end up on Facebook, someone tagging me, Minister, why isn't this picked up? So really, it's about making it efficient and very clear as to how we can improve how we currently handle our waste. A population that promotes a culture of circular economy. I think a very large part of this project, particularly from the point of view what government has to do, is a cultural mind shift, a paradigm shift. People look at garbage as being the responsibility and the problem of government. The reality is garbage is all of our problems. It's something where it's not only about the garbage, but the impact of garbage, health, your environment, and realizing that we have to look at our own personal consumption patterns. Instead of buying water bottles, can we get refillable jugs? Very simple things that we have to make sure that we bring into the national level. There's a number of persons, and I'll call him out here this evening, Mr. Javois, who has spent a lot of time in schools educating the young about the importance of recycling, about consumption patterns. And I think that's something that we're trying to scale up to the national level. Because again, if we can have a very functioning organization, we can have a functioning system, we can have the prettiest looking landfill. But if people don't understand or appreciate their role in waste, it won't be a success. Financially sound system, that's very clear. And of course, what we talked about earlier, a robust waste authority that's able to enforce and support. Finally, I think very importantly, who are the stakeholders in the success of the future of Sint Maarten waste management? Everyone on this list. The government of the Netherlands, of course, the primary sponsor and enabler of this project, the ones we want to thank very much for the donation of the money following Hurricane Irma. The World Bank, the facilitators, a wealth of expertise and knowledge, NRPB, the implementing agency, who has been very influential in making sure a lot of these things go according to plan. The government of Sint Maarten, we have a decision-making role in this. The staff have a very important role in this as well. And finally, of course, the community, the success drivers. The community members of Sint Maarten realize the need to create a cleaner and greener environment, which also requires their active engagement. The Ministry of Brommy recognizes that all citizens and visitors of our country are at the heart of our waste management revolution, meaning that as a key and primary stakeholder, their participation and cooperation are essential to the issues and success of our solid waste management vision. So in closing, I think what's very important and very dear to my heart, this motto, it takes all of us. Thank you very much.
Okay. I would like to thank the minister for his presentation. We do have space for 1 or 2 quick burning questions based directly from the minister's presentation just now. And how that will go is that we have 2 microphones at both ends of the room. We ask that when you step up to the microphone, you give your name, the organization you're representing, if you are doing such, and you keep your questions short and concise. We know that many people want to share their views, so we ask that you keep everything to the point. Most importantly, we really need to stress that we want to keep the conversation respectful. Everyone's perspective has value, and the best way to move forward is by listening to one another. My role as moderator is to keep things balanced and constructive so that every voice has a chance to be heard, and most importantly, I control the levels to the microphone. And I would really hate to cut anybody off. So please keep that in mind. So if anyone has any burning questions that they absolutely cannot wait about anything they just heard, we invite you to step up to the microphone, or if not, we will move over to the next part of the presentation. I see no one is making their way to the microphones. So then, in the interest of time, we will invite our next presenter. It is the EDMP project manager, Alvaro, and he will present the aspects of the EDMP project from recovery to resilience. Alvaro?
Good afternoon. I'm going to present briefly the project, Emergency Risk Management Project, EDMP, that was mentioned many times. So just a short overview of the project. We're going to present how this project fits in the future, the sector, what has been done so far, and what is in the pipeline. So basically, as the minister was presenting, the origin of this project was the response to the devastation caused by the hurricanes. So at that moment, funds by the government of Netherlands were allocated to respond, and these funds were managed by the World Bank. And then the NRPB was created just to prepare, implement, and evaluate projects. 10 projects were identified and being implemented, and one of those is EDMP, Emergency Debris Management project that I am presenting right now. And this project is being currently implemented in close collaboration with the Ministry of Rome. So as a snapshot, quick overview of essential data, this project started in January 2019. The overall value is 85 US million. And the main objectives of this project essentially was to collect the debris and clean up after devastation, and improve operation of the current landfill, both landfills, the provision of equipment that's going to be presented a bit later to operate the landfill, as a social and environmental risk of the landfill for potential impact collapsing because of the slope. Reorganize, rehabilitate, and upgrade partially close the landfill. This is the presentation that our colleague is going to later. Reduce the environmental and health hazard, the impact of the activity of the landfill on the population. And also, it's going to be also presented the inform and educate the community in Sint Maarten to stimulate the sustainable behavior, as the minister was mentioning. And finally, it's also a mechanism, opportunity to provide technical assistance and opportunities to the government through the Ministry of Rome on landfill operations. So how this project fit with the future of waste management Sint Maarten? So basically, this project is a significant contributor of national waste sector, because it's the first project that was focusing on the safe and sustainable waste management. Was the first initiative was focusing on this sector. Initially, it was identified, as I said earlier, as an emergency response project after the devastation of the hurricane. Just to remove the intention was initially to remove debris, to improve operation as well in the emergency, and to address the fires. But then quickly, it was adjusted to become a support to the sustainable waste management for Sint Maarten, expanding to initiate a long-term waste management by foundational investment. So it was a transition from emergency to development, a long-term. This project is also a stimulus for an approach for waste legislation. For instance, it's an opportunity, and it was, as it was identified, to address outdated legislation, as it was mentioned earlier, like the waste ordinance, as the minister mentioned. For instance, the finance framework for the entrance and the tipping fees, and also to improve the operational regulatory challenges in waste management. And then finally, this project should not be perceived as at the end solution. So when the project is done, finished, that's it. It's a critical step in the future. Waste management is a next step. It's a door that opens for further intervention and opportunities. So what was done in EDMP? Because we mentioned a lot here in this room, EDMP, but what was done? Let's just go briefly through all the activities that were completed so far. First, the fire suppression as an emergency response. The project was providing support to extinguish the fires and also provide alternative daily cover materials, including applicators, trucks, and training to reduce also the risk of fires in the future. This project also was supporting the removal of shipwrecks and the cleanup offshore lines, as you see numbers there, 139 shipwrecks and 3,200 metric tons scrap, etc. These are the figures that were achieved. Also provision of PPS for workers on the landfill and provision of heavy equipment, also for landfill operation like bulldozer, loader, solid waste compactor that are still working in the landfill. Also, this project provided support to the resettlement of those communities that were living in the southern parts, of the landfill, were resettled. So this project not only was compensating the loss of assets of these people, but also ensure the public safety to these persons that were impacted by this intervention. And then they were supported to be relocated. In total, 104 individuals were relocated, 32 businesses, 5 employees, and 2 speakers. All of them received compensation and training support to find a job. 71 were participating recently in training session to find a job and to develop skills professionally. After the resettlement, demolition, as you all could see, on the southern part of the landfill area, demolition of the area that was unsafe, informal structure that were created there. So the area was clean, and now we have a safe buffer zone because when the work starts there in the landfill, it's going to be also a area, unsafe area. Currently, the webridge the minister also was mentioning to facilitate the implementation of the policy to better operate the landfill and to ensure sustainability is the installation of the webridge. It's going to be installed soon at the entrance of the landfill. So the mechanism was also explained. It will facilitate also the waste management data, so we're gonna know the waste and the volume of waste that is dumped every day. And it will be the keystone of the to support the future shipping-free policy that was also presented. And finally, this project also has been implementing or developing a feasibility study as a landfill master plan, just to give us an overview of what to do, how, when in the landfill. So this study was released on July 4th, and this study included a genetic verification of soil stability, as was the first concern, as this slope were too steep and it was dangerous. Then impact assessment and management plan for environmental and social aspect were also developed. And then this study include analysis of different alternatives that were changed with the Minister of Economy, just to decide the best alternative to move forward, to intervene in the landfill. And then conceptual design, engineering design were developed as well to start the implementation. This is the presentation that our colleague is going to do after me. So next activities that are in the pipeline, focusing on the diversion, that is one of the policies for the future, and waste management, also as a reduction policy of waste, is the purchase of a concrete crusher, granary shredder that is now consuming a lot of volume in the landfill that is coming every day. And also support the Ministry of Economy as well to develop and implement a waste management campaign to raise awareness on waste management, on policies, and all things that are related in the waste sector. So the flagship activity of the EDMP is the intervention in the landfill. That's why we all are here. And the landfill intervention Basically, is this, but it's going to be presented a bit deeper by our colleague. The landfill intervention consists on the improving of operation, stabilization of slopes, because now it's too steep, as I said, reducing the environmental impact. We are going to explain also what are the impacts. And partial closure landfill, both landfills, and finally launch the design build contract that is going to happen in both landfills in parallel supervision of this engineering project for sure. So basically this is the intervention in the landfill. If any question, if not.
Thank you, Alvaro. So the key messages from his presentation, as you can see on the screen, is that EDMP was initially an emergency response project and later expanded to support the transition to long-term waste management. EDMP has significantly progressed in paving the way to a sustainable waste future, and EDMP should be seen as a critical step in the future of waste management rather than the end solution. If anyone has any burning questions about the presentation they just received, again, we invite you to make your way to the microphone. For those of you viewing online, we also encourage you to send an email to edmp@nrpbsxm.org, or you can just drop your question in the comments. We do also invite everyone in the audience today, if you have not registered as yet, these presentations can and will be sent to your individual email addresses if you do register, and a link will be provided to the general public as well tomorrow. I see we have one question, so I invite the kind lady to go ahead.
My name is Giselle. I have a small question. The gentleman already sat down, but he wrote down the design and build contract. What is that? Are we going to get more information?
Yeah, the design and contract is under process to implement the intervention, the concept design that was presented by the feasibility study that I just mentioned. This intervention is the main purpose of the next presentation. So you're going to have all details of how this intervention is going to be, how this design building will bring.
So there's going to be a building on the dome.
Design building, the engineering concept of building is the civil works. It's not building buildings. No,
I'll just wait till the next presentation.
It's the civil engineering concept. It's just civil works.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. And with that, I will invite our next presenter up. He is part of the consultancy, and he will present the findings from the feasibility study as well as the environmental and social impacts that were done. So I am sorry, we were supposed to have a break. You guys just absorbed a lot of information, and we have a lot more information for you to absorb. So we're going to allow persons to take a 10-minute break. We do have some refreshments, some light refreshments in the back, and we will see everybody back in 10 minutes to settle in, and we will get this evening going. Thank you. To the back, there is a person that really wants to leave. So please do that if you know that that is your car. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now move into the presentation of the findings of the feasibility study. We ask that the persons in the back of the room that are still getting a snack, if they can just keep it down a little bit. Next, I will invite Mr. Van de Coterlet from Witteveen+Bos and TAUW. He will explain who he is and dive right into the findings of the feasibility study and the social and environmental impacts and what is envisioned next. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Giselle. Thank you for the person who's blocking somebody's car, because I do appreciate everybody listening to me tonight. So let me go into the feasibility study. What we will do and what I will do is I briefly introduce what we have done, and after that, I will go into the site background. So I will explain some of the terminology I'm using later on in my presentation, but also what is used in the reports that are available on the website of the NRPB. After that, I will describe the current environmental status, really the message that why we should do something about this location. We'll go into the engineering design, and following that, the environmental and social impacts of what we're planning to do and what we are doing to mitigate those impacts. And I will finalize the presentation with a recap, just, to get your mind of all the information that I provided. As you've heard, the landfill will not be closed immediately. It will be reconstructed to allow for a better management of the site and less environmental impacts. And this redesign will lead to some additional space within the actual confines of the current area, where some landfilling can continue until the circular economy kicks in and we won't need the space anymore. So our ultimate goal is really to upgrade what's there to an acceptable level of environmental and social standards, and to allow for continued disposal of waste for a set period of time until improved collection, recycling, and processing of waste in Sint Maarten makes the need for landfilling obsolete. My name is Guido van der Coterlet. I'm an environmental engineer for over 20 years, working in the Caribbean, but all over the world on contaminated sites and hazardous wastes. So I've seen many, many landfills, and Sint Maarten is not the best, but also not the worst. And I think there's a lot of options to improve. I work for a company that's called TAUW. It's a Dutch engineering firm. We're nearly 100 years old. And together with Witteveen+Bos, another Dutch engineering firm, we have been contracted to hire to assist the NRPB in the whole process of tender documentation and associated actions. Essentially, and a bit to answer the question from before, is what we'll do is we look at the status of the landfill. We make a preliminary design, and that design is going to be included in the bidding documents. The bidding documentation is design and build. So a contractor is going to come and they're going to bid for the project, and they will actually come with the detailed design based on the specifications, the detailed specifications that we give. Following their detailed design, they will actually construct what is then done. So, site background. As I mentioned, we'll briefly describe what we're dealing with, some of the terminology used. The dump, as people are calling it, or the landfill. Technically speaking, we are splitting it into two parts. It's the solid waste disposal side, which is the side where most of the disposal of waste takes place. This is the high part. If you come from Philipsburg, it's on your left-hand side. And the Irma disposal site, or baby dump, as it's called, which is the area next to the baseball field. Again, when you come from Philipsburg, it's on your right-hand side. In addition, we'll talk about steel crushers, which is the company that actually collects car wrecks and crushes them. We'll talk about the Vromi yard, which is an area on Pond Island, which is used by Vromi to store materials. And we'll talk about the formal in-settlement area, which is the area that was recently cleared and that is next to the landfill. So when we go and have a look at the picture, of course, the red part is the big part of the landfill. So this is the solid waste disposal site. The yellow part is the Irma disposal site or baby dump. The Vromi yard is this green area in the back. You don't really see that when you drive over Sualiga Road, which is right over here. Then this area is the former informal settlement area, which has been recently cleared. Steel Crushers is the company that is right over there. And you will hear ring dike. Ring dike, it's not a dike as Dutch people would see it. Essentially, it is a road that will be constructed around the landfill to allow for access and stability. And this is some of the points that are important in the preliminary design that we have made for the site. Now, the solid waste disposal site, it contains a mixture of wastes, mostly household, regular waste. There is no indication, or we haven't seen any indication of very strange materials in there. It covers about 16 hectares, so that's 32 football soccer pitches, and it's about 42 meters above mean sea level, although maybe it has grown a bit more since last summer. One of the issues with this area especially is that the slopes are very steep, and we'll get into that a bit later. Now, the Irma disposal site was mostly used for the disposal of bulky and green waste. It's about 5 hectares and it's about 20 meters above main sea level. Steel Crushers, it's the company next to the road. It's not a government-owned company, it's a private company, and it collects and compacts car wrecks. Vromi yard is the green area. It's behind the Vromi site. It's about 3.5 hectares. And the former informal settlement area, which is the area directly next to the site that has been cleared or structured recently. And that is approximately 4 hectares in size. Now, what is the current environmental status? This is really the data that we use for our engineering design. We really wanted to know, okay, what's the impact of the landfill on the surrounding areas? What's happening? What are the problems? And we will discuss these things for you just to get a clearer picture of what we're looking at and what we are trying to improve. Some of the text on the slides is somewhat technical in nature. I am an engineer. But I'll try and explain it in layman's terms. Of course, I will mention again, there are reports on the NRPB website that will go into much greater detail than what I can explain tonight. Now, first, let me begin with our air quality. Air quality on the site is mostly affected by dust, smoke, and fires, which fortunately in the last couple of years have been less due to better operational practices by Vromi. One of the main problems you would see in any landfill site is really dust formation when trucks are moving over unpaved roads. There will be excavation in waste, trying to remodel, reprofile sections. And especially in the older sections of the landfill where burning took place in the past, the ashes are very fine, and as soon as you start digging it, it will create dust. Now, in 2019, there was an investigation done by the RIVM, and they found that most of the problems really remained on site. So there wasn't a very big off-site issue with dust. Dust concentrations actually stayed within limits, with an exception of a minor point at the bottom left side of the landfill. Doesn't mean that there's no dust moving off-site, but because of the prevailing wind direction coming from this side, most of the dust will settle in the Great Salt Pond. That is maybe a good thing considering. Now, if we go to landfill gas, I'll try and explain it. Landfill gas is a natural gas that forms when organic waste, and that can be food waste or green waste, will break down inside the landfill. It's really a common process, and it happens in all landfill sites. And you typically get the smell of rotten eggs. It's called methane, and it's a greenhouse gas. It's much stronger than CO2. So worldwide, we want to prevent that greenhouse gas going into the atmosphere and contributing to climate change. Now, we used international models to predict how much of that gas is forming in the landfill. And what we did is we used, the type of waste, the quantities, how much was disposed, and based on that, we have calculated the estimated gas quantities. Now, if you compare that to other landfills of similar size, it is actually on the low end. Why? Because of the burning in the past that already burned down a lot of the organic materials, and no gases can form of that. But also there is quite some inert material mixed, and it's a reasonably dry environment. Now, traffic. We did also a traffic assessment at Sualiga Road just to see how much traffic is going in there now. And we use that to compare it in the future when construction is going to take place, how much traffic is going to come and how that's going to affect the road traffic build up, these sort of things. Well, unsurprisingly, traffic in the morning goes towards Philipsburg and in the afternoon in the other direction. In addition, there is an official restriction of truck delivery between 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. and from 12 to 2:30. I would say, unsurprisingly, we didn't really see that in our traffic count. So there were still truck deliveries actually throughout the day. But I guess that might not surprise you either. Other than that, yeah, that's basically it on the traffic count. Now, when we go to the current environmental status of noise, odor, and the soil quality, what we would see is that there is noise generated at the landfill. I mean, this is normal. There's machines, there's excavators. However, this is very difficult to quantify because it's, momentum. One time it's going to be on the left side, then it's going to be on the right side. So there was never any specific study done for that, and that's also very difficult to do. The same applies to odor. I mean, what is unpleasant for me might not be unpleasant for somebody else. I might have a very strong nose, somebody has a weaker nose. So these are things that are not easy to quantify. It is clear that there is a smell, and that is not uncommon for landfill sites. So it's not specifically bad or better than other locations, I would say. When it comes to soil, there has been testing done on the soil next to the landfill site, and there was some contamination found, however, not in levels that would warrant any worries for environmental or human health. I'm not saying that the soil on the landfill site itself is of good quality, but nobody would actually live on that. So, you have a different use of the area. I also like the picture of Pond Island in 1970. So I wish we could go back to that, but I'm afraid that's one bridge too far. The Great Salt Pond, investigations have been done on the Great Salt Pond. It's a shallow pond. It really receives stormwater runoff from the surrounding areas. The water is mostly saline, but the general water quality is poor. And this is for a large part due to very low oxygen levels in the water. And what we see is that the landfill is one of the factors that contributes to that, but we believe it's definitely not the main factor. There is really runoff coming from the surrounding areas that also really affects the quality of the Great Salt Pond. And we see, for instance, high levels of coliform bacteria really indicated the presence of raw sewage. That is something that you would see at the landfill, for instance, because people have been disposing diapers. However, not on that scale. So there really is some other factors that also affect the Great Salt Pond. Now, when it comes to leachate and groundwater, I will try and explain what leachate is. Leachate is essentially the water that comes out of a landfill. So you've got the landfill. When it rains, the rain, especially big rains, will seep through the waste, and it will collect some of the pollutants and it will come out at the bottom. It tends to be black, smelly. It has bacteria in it, heavy metals. Now, this is something that happens in all landfill sites that are not fully controlled, such as the landfill here on Sint Maarten. And what happens at the landfill is you got the water coming in, and because there is no liner at the bottom, but there's a sandy layer when it was constructed in the 70s and 80s, when the water level in the Great Salt Pond drops, the leachate actually comes out of the landfill. You can see that in some areas that the canal next to it will discolor a bit in black colors. And that really indicates that there is a symbiosis between the landfill and the Great Salt Pond. Now, when the water level in the Great Salt Pond is high, of course, the water will go in the opposite direction to a certain level, and there will be not as much exchange as you would see at low levels. Again, that is something that we have concluded, and we'll try and describe what we're going to do to mitigate these sort of things. Now, it was also mentioned already before, the landfill is in an important part of your country, and that is really the Great Salt Pond, which was, of course, historically used for salt production. Now, there is a salt pan structure that is unfortunately no longer complete due to the expansion of Pond Island and some of the surrounding structures. But some of the old salt pan structures are still visible, both on the landfill side and on the IDS side, so the Irma disposal side. So what you can see here is these are the locations of the old, let's say, little dikes of the salt pan structures, where at these areas the landfill is actually already over them. So they already, I would say, encroached on the old structures from before. Now, the salt ponds are designated as a national monument, number B021, because they have architectural significance due to the original state of the design. They have heritage value as remnants of the slavery period and period of salt production in Sint Maarten. They are culturally significant due to the rare use of salt pans and the landscape values as defining features of the Great Salt Pond. Now, when we look at the biological environment, there is some wildlife on the landfill, but most of the fauna is a limited number of species. And this is logical because frequent changes on the landfill means that areas are plowed over, they're used for dumping, and then they're left alone for 1 or 2 years, then there's new dumping. So you will get the fauna that it's not very special, as to say. A lot of the creatures on there, they're also invasive species. So you'll see the iguana, you'll see a lot of turtles. So that is basically, there's not a lot of special things going on in the landfill. What is special is the Great Salt Pond, because it's an important feeding, breeding, and nesting area for residential birds and migratory birds. So this is really one of our focal points. The aquatic quality of the Great Salt Pond, most of it is also, we're looking at invasive species, tilapia, turtles. So really our focus on this is on the birds. Now, The geotechnical stability, I think it was already mentioned before, the slopes of the landfill are too steep. Now, what does that mean? There's two types of geotechnical stability, what we call micro stability and macro stability. Micro stability essentially is that you'll have a slope, and when the slope is too steep, especially when it rains, part of the slope will just slide down. It wouldn't say there is not a full collapse, but it will slide down. It will move quite a bit of dirt. It can be, a nuisance if it will go onto your road or into your garden or any place like that. But it's not, I would say, a dangerous situation. Now, macro instability is something else, and that's what you look at the top. Macro instability is not something that happens frequently. Usually there is a trigger, for instance, an earthquake, but it could be something else. And that is, in the case of the landfill, an issue because underneath the landfill, there is the old lake bottom. And the lake bottom consists of very soft clays. It's reasonably, it can slide. And also, if there's an earthquake, it can liquefy. Liquefaction is something that you could see on the beach. When you're on the beach and you slowly vibrate your foot next to the water, at some point your foot's gonna sink in and the water is gonna come up. That is something that can happen, in a situation like that. And that's an issue at the landfill simply because it was constructed in the wrong location in the past. So that is the current status. Now I will go into the engineering design. So as mentioned, what we have done is we've made a design basically stating, okay, this is what it's going to be. And that is going to be used in the future procurement documentation where future contractors are going to take it and they are going to detail that design. Maybe I can make an example as a house. We will say that, okay, the house needs to be 2 floors. We need to have a garage. We need to have 5 windows. It needs to have a flat roof and it needs to be, facing south. That you give to the contractor and the contractor then will say, okay, the window frames are going to look like that and the door handle is going to be black and you're going to have this type of tile. This is what we're looking at. So we have made the overall design. The contractor is going to make a detailed design in a later stage. So the engineering design, well, the criteria for the design were, first of all, ensure geotechnical stability. We've heard it already, slopes are too steep. So we want to make sure that the final design will be stable. It will stay in its place under normal circumstances. Secondly, our design is meant to reduce environmental health and safety impact. I've mentioned the current landfill has an impact on the environment, and we want to make sure that in the future situation, it will be a much better situation than it is now, with less impact on the grain salt pond, less impact on the surroundings, and much more to international standards. In addition, one of the boundary conditions we're given was that we have to maintain the existing boundaries. So we are not expanding the landfill outside the area that we're looking at. That was one of the conditions that we've got, and that's what we have used in our design. The last important point is really to maximize remaining disposal lifespan. It takes time to move from a linear economy to a circular economy. And in the meantime, you need to have a backup plan. You cannot just stop and then hope that, okay, we'll be fine. No. So we need to make sure that we maximize the remaining disposal lifespan within the actual boundaries of the current landfill. So what design components do we use? Essentially, what is going to happen is there's going to be a reprofiling of the existing contour. It's too steep. Certain areas need to be, let's say, made less steep. It has to be topped up at a certain maximum height, and that will allow for the continued landfilling in certain parts. So there's going to be a lot of movement of soil and materials to make sure that we actually can comply with that. Second point is the construction of a ring dike. I will go into that a bit later, why that's necessary and why we do it or we propose it at the location it is now. Third point is we're going to put a capping system on top. Again, I will explain that in a bit more detail, what that entails. There will be a landfill gas management system implemented, and there will be auxiliary facilities. Again, I will go into more details in the next slides. So reprofiling of the existing contour, necessary to ensure the stability of the landfill. This will involve movement of soil and waste using excavators, dumper trucks, compaction and roller compactors. So there's going to be a lot of movement of soil from left to right. Of course, the contractor is going to try and move as little as possible, because it's just, you know, the further you have to move it, the more money it's going to cost. He's not going to move it from here that way. He's going to move it from here there, from there there. So he will try and stay as close as possible to where he's getting it from. But he has to have a design with a certain slope angle, with, for instance, you know, how you actually have to make your slopes that they are stable. We estimate at this stage that it's about 600,000 cubic meters of material that needs to be moved. I think by the top of my head that equals 3 years of landfilling. So that's, you know, that's the quantities you're going to be looking at. These quantities might change a bit depending on how much waste is coming, is adding and final design, but this is a rough estimate at this stage. What we are trying to do is that during excavation, any construction and demolition waste in larger quantities are kept separate so they can be recycled and reused where possible. Again, this is part of circular economy. We don't want to import materials if we don't have to, because there is already some material there. And this is something that we can really prescribe in the documentation for the future contractor, that they are obliged to use this material. Now the ring dike, that is needed for geotechnical stability and accessibility. Now, geotechnical stability of the ring dike, why is that the case? Well, if you have a steep slope like this, it can slide like that, but if you have a ring dike against it, it will give you a counterweight, a counter pressure. So that allows you to actually make the slopes steeper, and you know, you allow more landfilling to take place, or you have a more volume available. Now, unfortunately, there is no space within the landfill, so the ring dike will need to be constructed around the landfill site, but in the Great Salt Pond. So we'll try and reduce that as much as possible, so to keep it as small as possible. And we want to make use of recycled materials, construction and demolition waste that is crushed, processed, to be included in the ring dike. Again, really to try and make things as circular as possible. In addition, there is rock armor around it at the moment, and you know, we will try and reuse that material as much as we can. Any mangrove vegetation that is present will need to be removed at this stage, but will be reinstated afterwards. Now, closure capping. So those parts of the landfill that will be closed. Well, in the end, everything will be closed, but that will be a phased approach. What will be closed will be capped to limit infiltration and future leachate generation. So essentially, there will be it's not necessarily plastic, but it's an impermeable cover that will go over the entire landfill, and that will prevent the rainwater from infiltrating. That will prevent this leachate from generating. So you will get a cap over the entire landfill, and any rainwater that then falls on top of that will remain clean, rather than going to the waste and taking up the the pollutants and the poop bacteria that are in there. Drainage mats inside this top cover will make sure that any rainwater will be channeled to the sides, and this water will actually go into the Great Salt Pond clean rather than as leached or contaminated because of the waste that was present. This is an impression of a landfill elsewhere. It's not Sint Maarten, I think it's not even in the Caribbean, but this is essentially what these landfills look like at the end. And of course, you'll see it's a green space with short vegetation. So it's not really possible to grow trees on that, simply because the roots of the trees will actually go through the plastic, and then you will get leakage again, etc. So it will be closed as a green area. Now, landfill gas. Landfill gas, as mentioned, it's a gas. It's a greenhouse gas. What will be done is the landfill gas will be collected through a network of drains. These drains are going to be underneath the cap, and all the gas will be channeled to a number of exit points, and from there will be pumped to biofilters. Biofilters are essentially big skips or big squared areas filled with organic material, and when we actually pump the gas through it, it will oxidize, and instead of methane, you will get CO2 and water, which is much better for the environment than methane gas, which is a much stronger greenhouse gas. I hope I still have you. I know it's a lot of technical information. I'm trying to explain it as good as I can. The auxiliary facilities, there will be, things around the landfill. Essentially, what you're going to have is you've got your buildings, you've got your weighbridge, you've got your fences. There needs to be a surface road, temporary contractor yard. You've also seen that within the program there will be procurement of crushers and materials, equipment like that. That all needs to have its place. So that is really something that will come in the surroundings of the landfill, mostly in the area of the setback distance. And I will get to that a little bit later on. So construction period, the construction is expected to be in 2 phases. First phase would be 1.5 to 2 years, with reprofiling expected to take up to 16 months. The construction closure capping is expected to take about 14 months, and landfill gas management system installation also around 14 months. These activities can run parallel to each other, so it's not that they have to wait, but they can run parallel. At the moment, as it looks now, the start of the work is anticipated for the end of 2026. After final stoppage of the landfill, so when it's full closure is expected to take another 26 months in phase 2. In that construction period, the idea is that the IDS side will be closed completely in the first period, and the landfilling will only continue on the left side, so in the main landfill. Now, so this is the engineering design. What we have done, and that's part of the World Bank standards, is that we have done an environmental and social impact assessment, where we really try to look at what is going to happen during the construction, what are the impacts of what we are planning to do on the environment and on people, and what mitigation measures we can take. Okay, what can we do to prevent this from becoming a problem? So let me start with the social impacts. The main issue, of course, is that some of the economic operators that are present in the area, they will need to be relocated. That is steel crushers, and there is a facility of Windward Roads that is operating on the landfill. They cannot be there anymore. I mean, that land is needed for the actions and they will be there. They have been contacted, and there is discussions going on exactly what's going to happen there. In addition, the Sint Maarten Soccer Association has a long lease on a plot of the Irma disposal site. That area is currently already used for disposal, but the original idea was that it could be made available for the Sint Maarten Soccer Association. That is no longer the case. The quantity of waste on that side of the landfill is so great that it wouldn't be feasible to move that. So a solution needs to be found for that too. In addition, residents, commercial and public facilities between the landfill and the Juan Boulevard, apologies if I mispronounced that, waste pickers, they will be impacted during construction through increased traffic, noise, dust. Of course, there's a lot of activities coming. So yeah, anybody who lives in those areas, you could expect, with any construction project that there's going to be, some impact. Now, for the social impacts, the mitigation measures, they will be done according to World Bank standards, and that's OP 412, and the resettlement has been triggered. As mentioned before, the individual economic operators are contacted, and they will, a resettlement with them will be agreed upon. The socio-economic assessment is being procured, so to really see, okay, what's going to happen, what are the costs, what are the damages. These are some of the processes that are taking place right now. Now, this social impacts for you, for people living in the area or working in the area, I will get to that in the next couple of slides. First, air quality and odor. Essentially, I'm not going to deny that, is that work on the landfill will lead to a temporary increase in dust, maybe some volatile organic compounds. These are, let's say, some pollutants that can be in the air, and increasing greenhouse gases. There will be an increased risk of fires and associated smoke during reprofiling. There can be some additional landfill gas generation, and additional odor nuisance is expected, especially when reaching deeper on wetter parts of the landfill. Simply, there's going to be a lot more activity on the area than there is now. So the more you dig, the more smell you're going to get, the more dust you're going to get. Now, what are we proposing that the contractor will do to prevent this from happening, or to really mitigate that as much as possible? Firstly, his equipment needs to be in good order. He shouldn't be idling. And we can actually require the contractor to do these things. The contractor will need to submit a contractor environmental management plan, and that can be enforced by the contracting authority. In addition, the contractor will schedule construction and rehabilitation work during daylight hours to minimize activity during weekends, holidays, etc. Limit idling of equipment, machinery when not in use, and he will have an environmental health and safety monitoring plan to monitor air, water, soil emissions during construction work. Now, when we are looking at dust, I think dust is one of the main points that will be an issue. There will be requirements for dust suppression during work, and that can be anything from the requirement to water any unpaved roads, to use water cannons when excavating very dusty areas, or to try and keep the excavation areas as small as possible during the work, that they don't open up huge areas at the same time, but rather work in little patches to try and minimize what happens. In addition, another thing that can be implemented is that all trucks that leave the site, they will go through a wash or a vibrator, that the dust that's on the wheels will actually be removed, so you wouldn't get the dust on the public roads and the cars wouldn't drive through the dust and spread it further. These things we can all prescribe through the contractor environmental and social mitigation and management plan. Now, other actions that can be done for air quality, fire, smoke, and odor. Of course, fires, we want to prevent that. Contractor will make sure that he has a prevention plan in place, that they have actions in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. When it comes to odor, again, that's difficult to quantify, but there will be an independent supervisor. If there's complaints about odor, we can require the contractor to close up smelly areas, to close up at night, or if they don't work for a week or a weekend. That's, especially the areas that cause the most odor are closed off to try and limit that as much as possible. Now, roads and traffic. What we would expect, and of course, it can change depending on the contractor's preference, is that they're going to bring in a lot of material still, despite all the circular efforts, from outside Sint Maarten. We're looking mostly at soil for the top cover, which is not available in these quantities on the island. And we expect them to bring it in the port and to bring it to the landfill site. So this is the shortest route. It might be that they choose another port, but that wouldn't be very logical, because as soon as the material comes in, you want to have your supply routes as short as possible. If you bring it on the other side of the island, you need 2 or 3 times the number of trucks to bring it in. So there will be an estimated 14,000 additional truck movements with heavy trucks full with soil along these roads over the period of construction. And these heavy dumper trucks, they will increase noise and vibration in these areas. Now, what can we do about that? First of all, we can implement traffic controls on Sualiga Road between the IDS and the solid waste disposal site entrance. So essentially, between the two sides of the landfill, there's going to be a lot of crossing back and forth from excavators, machines, trucks, etc. The contractor is going to implement certain traffic measures to make sure that there is no problems coming there. In addition, we can request speed limits, and we can avoid rush hours, school time, these sort of things. Because the contractor has that in their management plan, that can be enforced. It's not something that needs to be enforced by VROMI or the police. No, the independent supervisor can enforce that, because that's connected to the contractor's contract. So that's how within the project you can really try and control these sort of environmental impacts. Now, when it comes to noise, what we're going to see is that in addition to the noise on the landfill itself, which we do not expect to carry that far to be of a problem of the surrounding areas, when, for instance, crushing facilities will move, the noise pattern will change. For instance, steel crushers is right now over here. If they would move there or there, and that hasn't been decided yet, the noise will be generated in these areas. Now, what is going to be done is there's going to be a maximum level calculated for any of the people living close by, that they wouldn't be exposed to certain noise levels. And if that would be the case, and that is in the next slide, there would be a noise barrier of some sort constructed between that noise-making equipment and a business or a resident that lives close by. In addition, when it comes to noise, the implementation of speed restrictions for heavy vehicles on public roads. So if there's vehicles that would work on the project, they would be allowed to drive 30 instead of 50. That would also reduce how much noise they would make. Now, when it comes to geology, soil, and slope stability, slope failure can impact residents and commercial businesses with close proximity to steep slopes. And this is one of the reasons that people were actually moved out of the informal resettlement area. Now, what we are going to do is there's going to be what we call, and that's in this slide, there's going to be, okay, I'll go back. there's going to be a setback distance. Essentially, there's no businesses within 40 meters of the toe of the landfill. So if anything happens, if the slope does come down, there's nobody living there in these areas. Doesn't mean that it doesn't impact anybody, because of course, if there's activities on the landfill, those people would still be within that setback distance, but it wouldn't be third parties in this case. That's, I think, also in addition, if the future car processing will take place outside the landfill area, there will be measures in place to protect the soil in these areas. Another important thing is that imported soil will be checked for quality, so both chemically and biologically. We don't want to bring in soil from, I don't know, Dominican Republic, and it contains seeds that are non-native to Sint Maarten, and of course we'll get a boom of non-native species, something that has been a huge issue in Europe with Japanese knotweed. That is, it's been imported from Japan, and they cannot get rid of that anymore. So there will be controls on what is actually coming into the country quality-wise, and that's both chemically and biologically. When it comes to hydrology, and surface water quality, we expect a temporary leachate increase during slope recontouring and some suspended solids. Essentially, when the landfill is completely uncovered or there's a lot of activity going on, when the water falls on it, it will bring more sediments and sand that will flow into the Great Salt Pond. In addition, the installation of the ring dike will impact the water quality because you need to dig in the water, you will stir it up, you will bring up the sediments, so you will get colorations. But after finalization of the work, the situation is expected to improve compared to the baseline. What we are going to do really to manage this is we use temporary erosion during the work. So we want to make sure that the water doesn't directly go to the Great Salt Pond while we're still working. We will try and establish control of sediments in the area of the ring dike. So there might be that we will prescribe that the excavators would work different type of bucket, or there might be a small inflatable barrier, these sort of things. In addition, I think the most important thing is that there will be a setup of surface water quality system during construction activities. So that's a lot of text. Ecology. During the operation, any shrubs and bushes on the current site will be removed during reprofiling. There's going to be so much movement, there's not a single tree or shrub that we can protect within the landfill area. Now, as mentioned before, there is not a lot of important flora present. The mangrove vegetation, unfortunately, also needs to be removed for the installation of the ring dike. It's simply, it's in the way. The ring dike needs to go all the way around, so that mangrove will be removed. After construction phase, the improvement of the ecological status of the area is expected. The mangroves will be reinstated, the area will be greened, so the actual situation is bound to improve. Now, what we're going to do to try and minimize the impact on the ecology is biological surveys. So essentially, checks, okay, certain birds, are they nesting in the area? Contractors will get actual lists. Okay, if you encounter this bird, this is what you need to do. If this tree has a nesting bird, you'll need to wait for it until it's actually done, and only then can you actually move in. These are specific actions for the contractor to limit the disturbance to these species, and especially protected species. In addition, we'll monitor the oxygen level in the Great Salt Pond during construction of the ring dike. I mean, there has been fish kills in the past. We don't want to worsen that situation by the activities. So we'll try and make sure that, when the activities take place in the Great Salt Pond for the construction of the ring dike, we are going to monitor the water quality on the spot and say, okay, listen, we have to wait. It's not a good situation at the moment, to try and avoid these kills. Of course, last but not least, there's a compulsory planting scheme for the mangrove removing using juveniles and seedlings. When it comes to worker and public health and safety, of course, the site workers will be exposed to more dust, concentration, and smoke from the landfill fires. Site workers will be at risk due to the presence of the heavy machinery and increased vehicle traffic. There will be increased dust emissions and, of course, higher risk of traffic accidents because there's simply more trucks on the road. What can we do to that? Of course, in addition to the traffic measures that were already prepared and discussed, there will be open for complaints to the public. So if there's issues, there's nuisance, from time to time, the contractor will organize a gathering where people can come in and express their grievance, and these will be registered. There will be an independent supervisor present on behalf of the client to make sure that the contractor is going to keep to his word and keep to his plan. There will be a traffic management plan in place and a grievance redress mechanism. Of course, the contractor will need to comply with local and World Bank guidance regarding labor conditions. Last but not least, the archaeological, historic and cultural heritage and aesthetic effects. Unfortunately, the installation of the new ring dike will further reduce the open area of the Great Salt Ponds. Now, we're looking about 5 meters width above water and maybe 10 to 15 underneath the water. But still, it is something that will encroach, especially in these areas, the remaining salt pan structures. In addition, what we're going to be looking at is that the new site, although it will not be much higher than it is now, it will have a bigger crest. So in the end, the mountain or the dump will be bigger than it is now, but it will be closed at a height which is approximately the same height as it is now, but with the crest being wider. The maximum crest level on the Irma disposal site will slightly be above current height. However, after closure, the landfill will have a more natural look. Now, what are we proposing to mitigate these impacts? First of all, we propose greening of non-operational areas through irrigation. So when the contractor is not going to work in a part for 6 months or a year, we try and make sure that that stays as green as possible. And we're going to consult the Monument Council on the way forward to limit the impacts on the salt pan structure. Now, I think it's a sensitive topic, but in my view, the way it looks now, it's actually much worse than the way it's going to look in the future. Because now we do have the chance to actually make it, close it properly. We can use the same structure as the salt pans, for instance, for the rock armor around it. So there is actually a chance to improve it. But yeah, okay, this is my personal view on that. That is something that we ensure that the embankments of the ring dike are similar structure, materials than the original salt pan banks, using locally available natural rocks. So we're not going to have concrete blocks there. We're going to try and make use of what's already there to make it look and feel more natural. Of course, the Monuments Council will give their input on that, and we'll have discussions with them on that topic. And this is a preliminary design idea, and there will be a permit needed in any case for this. Natural disaster risk. The slopes of the new landfill will be stable under non-earthquake conditions. However, slope stability under earthquake conditions is not possible to achieve. Simply, the landfill is too high, subsurface is of such poor quality that it will, if we want to implement that, we need to have a ring dike that would be 200 meters wide. There wouldn't be any great salt pond left. But because we have, of course, a setback distance, if that happens, there wouldn't be, the impact would be limited. So that's the idea. The situation is already not good. We are improving it by making sure that there is a setback distance. But if an earthquake happens, and hopefully, God forbid, it doesn't, and it's not super earthquake prone, Sint Maarten, then yeah, we cannot guarantee that it stays there. In addition, the new ring dike will reduce the rainwater buffering capacity of the Great Salt Pond. At the moment, we estimate it's about 2% of the buffering capacity that's going to be lost. So what are we going to implement to prevent that? First of all, with regards to the setback distance, that's going to limit the impact of slope failure in case of an earthquake. With regards to the buffering capacity of the Great Salt Pond, that will remain the same. So essentially, whatever is going to be taken off by the new ring dike will be compensated either by dredging, shoreline adaptation, or improvement of discharge facilities. So we'll make sure that the buffering capacity of the Great Salt Pond stays and remains what it is right now. So that was basically the technical presentation. I guess it's a lot of information, so I've got a brief recap. So essentially, current situation. Landfill infrastructure is not according to international standards. It's a dump, basically. You're calling it a dump, it is a dump. It's managed, there is control, and the control is done in a way that is to the best knowledge and means of those who are operating it. But because the infrastructure is not there, you know, it's impossible to operate it correctly. The current situation has dust, has odor, has gases, has fires from time to time, although they have been controlled much better. In the current situation, we have the leachate coming from the landfill and it goes straight into the Great Salt Pond. The water quality of the Great Salt Pond is poor, but it's not only because of the landfill. If we would clean up the landfill, it's not going to be that the Great Salt Pond all of a sudden is swimmable and ready. It needs other actions as well. However, you know, if we do these works at the landfill, it is contributing to an improvement of the situation. And the landfill slide, the slopes are too steep. Now, during construction, what are we going to be expecting? More dust formation. That is going to be mitigated by really, in most cases, using water to limit the dust. That's the most simple and straightforward way. We're going to have more traffic. That is also something that we cannot fully avoid, but traffic measures will be put in place. Noise patterns are going to be different. Noise barriers will be made at selected locations in case there is an exceedance of that in the next commercial or residential buildings. We can expect more odor. Again, we'll try and reduce this by asking the contractor either to cover certain parts or, you know, to limit the size of their excavation area, maybe to speed up or slow down certain parts. The ecology will be disturbed, but specific actions will be taken for protected species, and the end situation will be much better than it is now. Same applies to archaeology. We will encroach slightly on some of the salt pan structures, but we also now have a chance to beautify the area in a way that does more justice to the salt pan structures and the overall view of Great Salt Pond than what it is right now. So final situation, a brief recap. The landfill will stay in its current place. It will be reprofiled with roughly the same height. It will be covered with clean soil. In the end situation, dust, odor, and leachate coming from the landfill will be stopped or greatly reduced. The landfill area will be greened, and the project will be finished in approximately 7 years, during which a transition to a new waste management system will be implemented in Sint Maarten. And this is an artist's impression of how it would look like when it's fully closed. So you've got here the IDS on that side. That would be closed first, and that would be done in the first roughly 2 years and that the bigger area will be closed after it has reached its full capacity, and that would be starting around 7 years from now. Next steps, and this is, I think, my last slide before we go into the discussion. The environmental and social impact assessment and the environmental and social management plans will be uploaded and shared through the National Recovery Program Bureau. There is already a version there available. You can read it, you can go through it. The questions and answers from tonight will be included. So there will be updates coming in the next couple of weeks as well. The bidders will be informed of the environmental and social requirements, mitigation and monitoring. Selected contractor will further detail all necessary actions in the final environmental and social impact assessment and final environmental and social management plans. These plans will be approved and checked by the NRPB and World Bank. And of course, there will be an independent supervision to make sure that the contractor actually complies to what he or she writes in those plans. And the NRPB and FROMI will monitor the execution of the works and associated environmental and social impacts during the execution phase. That was it. Thank you for participating.
Okay, a couple of things are going to happen simultaneously. I'm going to invite Guido to take a seat. I'm going to ask Alvaro, the minister, Mr. Connor, and SG Plazimon to join us on stage. The rest of the audience, I'm going to ask you to stand. Those at home can do this as well. I have a plan in my head. Because we've just been sitting for an hour, more than 2 hours. So just stretch for a moment, get the kinks out, get your brain going. All right, please have a seat. The gentlemen are all on stage, and we are going to move over to our question and answer segment. Again, the microphones are located on either side of the room. When you step to the microphones, we ask that you identify yourself and your organization if you are representing one. We remind everyone to please keep their questions short and concise. Because of the time, we want to limit everyone to one question, please. We also have persons online that will be submitting questions. And as I can see people already moving to the mics, please keep your questions to one question. Be respectful, be courteous. And with that, I didn't do the key messages from Guido's presentation. The landfill will remain at its current location. Measures will be taken to improve the environment and social impacts around the site. And once closed, the areas will be transformed into a greener, more sustainable space. With that, I will start on this side of the room. I will ask the gentleman to identify himself and please state his question.
Good evening. My name is Stark Peterson. My question, well, now I have to choose the most important one, but just from your feasibility study, just curious, do we have data on the type of waste and the cubic meter estimate for example, solid waste, construction debris, greenery, so on and so forth? Would that data be available?
I guess I answered that question. Yes, that data is available. There have been studies done, I think, detailed studies in 2009, 2010. We have extrapolated that to the current situation. In addition, what we have done is we have made a digital terrain model of the landfill last year, August. And we subtracted that from an older digital terrain model. So we could actually see how much waste was added over that period of time. So we do have a good information on the quantity of waste, the quality of the waste, and predictions of how much waste is going to be added in the future.
Is that public information?
It is in one of the reports. I think that's shared at NRPB. So
Okay.
if it's not on the website, you could request the NRPB to share that information.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I move over to the next side of the room, please.
Okay, good evening. My name is Billy Pugh. I'm a retired environmental engineer from the United States. And first, I'd like to congratulate everybody for addressing what is a long and serious problem for this island. We are limited to one question.
For now, yes, because as you can see, there's a line of
Okay,
persons
I've got
behind you.
Several questions, but I guess I'll hit the biggest one, and that is your remedy in terms of the capping and so on and so forth. If I understand it correctly, does not consider continued leachate coming out underground and into the salt pond. So I guess my question is, number one, have the sediments of the salt pond itself been characterized and delineated to the point where we know what part of the salt pond is contaminated? And number two, because there is differential in water levels, as we know, in the rain and so on and so forth, there's going to be continued communication of water between that in the landfill and that outside the landfill. How are you going to prevent that polluted leachate from entering the salt pond?
Thank you.
A very good question. I can tell you are an environmental engineer. We had long discussions about this, and I'm going to try and keep it as least technical as I can. Essentially, the issue is that there was no liner at the bottom of the landfill when it was constructed. Now, we said, okay, maybe we can extract the leachate, make sure that we pump it up and we hydrologically contain that. But as soon as we started to calculate that, it actually meant that we would extract so much water from the Great Salt Pond that we'd be actually cleaning salt water at huge expense, where the leachate would remain in place. Now, the idea is that if we cover the landfill, the infiltration of water will reduce, let's say, 80, 90%. So the actual generation of leachate would be a lot less than it is now. That doesn't mean that there is no exchange of leachate in the future. We do expect that to happen, but it would be greatly reduced within the means that are possible. So there will be some leachate still coming in, especially if the water level in the Great Salt Pond is going to fluctuate. It's going to come out a bit and back. But to fully take care of that we would need to double our budget, basically.
Perhaps not.
Thank you, sir.
But I would question that capping the landfill would result in 80 to 90% of the leachate being contained, especially considering the hydraulic pressures that are at work between what's in the landfill and what's out of the landfill. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe all members of the panel will be around after this discussion if persons want to approach them and continue the conversations. Before we move to the next question, I will kindly remind everyone to keep their phones on silent, keep the noise from phones limited so that we can all be fully present in the room. Sir, on this side of the room.
Hello, good evening. My name is Claude Chapois of the Green Dream Projects, Sustainable Waste Management with students at the schools. My question is, how will the activities at the landfill in the future affect businesses surrounding the area, such as the university and all the businesses along the Ring Road area? How is that going to be controlled and what measures are going to be taken? That's my only question.
Who do I give the question to?
Well, the environmental and social management plan, again, the one that's available on the website of the NRPB, provides in detail the actions that are going to be taken to try and mitigate the impacts of the construction. When it comes to some of the businesses and the commercial activities on Pond Island, your main issue is going to be the traffic, maybe the noise, to a certain level, the dust, but that's more on the north side and on the west side. Traffic measures will be put in place. So we want to make sure that whatever trucks are going to come, they're going to take the shortest route, they're going to keep to the speed limit. And as mentioned before, we can implement restrictions on timing. For instance, we don't want to have trucks when schools open or when schools close, you know. So we can put certain restrictions on that, and that is, you know, to try and mitigate the impact to the surrounding community as much as possible. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, and congratulations.
We do have one question online before the next gentleman comes up. It says, can anyone indicate what plans there are, if any, under the new waste management plans for e-waste in the short term and or the long term? E-waste, what plans, if any, are there for them?
Yeah. Thanks so much, Giselle. Just maybe a clarification as to if e-waste means electronic waste? Yes, exactly. So it's actually one of the things that we're looking at in terms of if you're looking at reducing recycling, there's parts of every electronic or every good that can be used in reuse. That's a solution. You also have solutions towards, for example, high technology, such as waste energy pyrolysis, which we're looking at. And in those situations, you can actually put all of that electronic waste into pyrolysis, and it basically reduces the volume by about 98%. So these are things that we're actually looking at in terms of long-term waste solution, because currently what happens is that a large amount of it ends up exactly in the landfill, and our whole idea is to reduce that as well. So e-waste, electronic waste, is part of the future in terms of reduction, one, but also through circular economy. How can we reuse parts of those electronics in different applications?
Thank you. Sir?
My name is Andre Ellis. I am a pharmacist working across the street, and I'm representing all my colleagues with this question. Studies have shown that pharmaceutical waste that is flushed or discarded with regular trash has an environmental impact. Let's say, and this is again that I'm dropping to the Honorable Minister, that Sint Maarten implements a pharmaceutical waste collections program for households and pharmacies. Will the new engineering design for the reprofiling have specific provisions for pharmaceutical and hazardous waste?
Can you repeat that last part one last time?
Okay. The gentleman with the last presentation gave an overview, and I'm just curious for pharmaceutical and hazardous waste, if any provisions have been made in the plans, because I felt you mentioned a lot of types of waste, but I missed hazardous and pharmaceutical waste in the list. And medical waste would then, okay, sorry, I'm being whispered by the Sint Maarten medical center that I should also include medical waste in my question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Good night to everyone. Is this thing on? You hear me? Hello? Hello? Okay. Good evening. So the interventions that we're discussing tonight is what we're going to do with the landfill, how we're going to also ensure that by the time the landfill is full, that we have actually closed it in an environmentally friendly way. Next to this project, part of the main waste management project of that's going to be run within the Ministry of Romy is to also take a look at which different waste streams do we have on Sint Maarten, and how do we create a circular economy, but also how we recycle and properly also dispose of, like you say, hazardous waste. But it's not in scope of this project specifically, which is for the interventions that are happening on the landfill. That will be on in a subsequent project within the future.
Minister?
Yes, if I can just add on that, and I think In the discussion we had, we need to remember and recall that this project has several different components. EDMP itself really is focused on the physical intervention. From the VROMI/government point of view, what our role is basically addressing that diversion. So one of the key things of why we have to think green and the idea of it takes all of us is that eventually we're looking at, can we sort different waste streams either at home or at the business or at the commercial center or at the landfill. Currently, we don't. Actually, we're the only country in the kingdom that has no recycling or separation mechanisms at all. Part of the whole idea of why it takes all of us is that essentially whatever we present as a government as the way forward has to be bought by the people. So if we have, for example, a solution of, okay, you're going to have a bin for your plastics, a bin for your organics, a bin that you put your sort of hazardous needles, whatever, in if you have them at home, that essentially is part of what government has to decide on the future of waste. It isn't necessarily within the EDMP scope, it's really what we decide to do. And of course, this is why the feedback is so important, because I can say some countries like Germany, they have 6 different bins in every house. Are we prepared as a people to accept 6 different bins and sorting facilities? Or are we going to say, as a sort of a phase 1, we're going to put everything in one bin, and then we're going to sort at the sort of facility on the landfill? So it's a very short answer is, it depends on what the people basically can accept, and why, for example, the whole idea of the Think Green program, educating people about the impact of what they consume and how they dispose of it, is really going to determine, in the end of the day, what government can do and how fast they can do it to implement the separation of different waste streams. So I can put anything forward, but it really requires everybody to accept it and to buy into it. And that's a really critical part of this project's success.
Would you be interested in discussing this further with the Pharmaceutical Association of Sint Maarten?
Yes, of course. I think without a doubt.
And as an MC.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask the lady 1 second to hold off 1 second, because we have a line forming on the other end. So I'm going to allow this gentleman to go first.
Thank you for calling me a gentleman. I sell tires and I sell batteries, and I think maybe your previous answer goes into that. The waste stream of tires, what are we doing with that right now? What is happening?
Yeah, so very briefly, there was a tender put out about 2 or 3 times to, one, address the matter of the tires in the landfill. Unfortunately, the tenders failed. As part of our sort of long-term government vision for waste management is that instead of putting tires in the landfill or sending them abroad, or the worst case scenario which happens and it's really bad environmentally, burning tires, you can actually take this material and you can shred it and put it into road applications. It's really about finding solutions that, one, reduce the waste and also lower the cost. If you're building a road, for example, aggregates cost a lot of money. People change tires because sometimes our roads aren't the best here. People change tires very often. You can basically strip those tires down, put them into aggregates as an aggregate to road, for example. So it's the long-term vision of what we want to do when it comes to all the tires we have. And we're also exploring currently what we're going to do with the massive pile of tires in the landfill. The idea is, of course, this circular economy and this transition will take time, and this is why it's sort of the idea of continuing to landfill until we get to that point of the new circular economy is present. But the key message is basically all those things we're exploring, what we can do instead of just putting it onto the landfill.
When you are prepared to speak to the hospital, talk to us.
Come speak to you. Will do. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Rina from the World Bank. Questions. Thank you for covering the risk of earthquake, but the obvious risk of hurricane. What is the plan, the mitigation plan and the measures put in place when the hurricane season starts with the strong wind, etc., and rains, etc., during the actual works? And second, have you considered nature-based solution for the ring dike? Thank you. Instead of gray infrastructure. Thank you.
Guido, you can start, and then
Okay.
Giselle can finish.
I mean, when it comes to slope stability, that is calculated on heavy rains. I mean, that's what we're looking at. When it comes to slope stability, we need to make sure that they're stable even when there's a huge amount of rainfall. That's the micro stability, and that is ensured in the new design. When it comes to the let's say measures to take when there is an earthquake coming, of course, that will need to be included in the contractor environmental health and safety management plan. So that might include, I don't know, getting the equipment off the landfill and other actions. And I don't think that is going to be much different from the action plans that are already implemented, or whether or not in a planned form or in a practical form on the landfill itself at this stage. So
you mean during the hurricane, not the earthquake? That's what you mean, right?
I'm talking about
Okay.
hurricane.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes.
If I can just add to the answer, I think it's a very good question because again, we're in an environment where a hurricane comes and it completely throws us off. The whole Irma debris site is sort of about 6 hectares or 4 hectares of waste collected after one storm. So the question actually becomes twofold. It's what do we do in the transition from when we're doing this project, and also what do you do in the long term when a hurricane comes with a kind of a capped landfill? I think short term we are having discussions about the impact of potential hurricanes in this entire process. There's a lot of discussions, not necessarily only as Sint Maarten, because it's not a Sint Maarten problem. This is actually a regional, it's actually a kingdom problem. What are the solutions in the event that we have a hurricane next year, this year? Where do you put this waste? There's discussions about possibility of off-taking, so having it shipped away. There's also a discussion about temporary debris site. If in the event of that coming to place, so basically it won't be necessarily a permanent landfill, it'll be a temporary landfill, and it'll be properly arranged. We have a liner, because as explained in the presentation, the current dump landfill wasn't done correctly. There is no line, so leaching comes into the lagoon. If you put into the pond, the idea is a temporary debris site, you'll have a liner that will basically capture whatever comes out of that hurricane debris, and then it can be used or sent off or reused in future applications. The more long-term idea is if you cap the landfill, you have a hurricane, a lot of that debris will then be used in the circular economy / the waste energy through agreements as well with other countries that we have to efficiently get rid of it. So it's two things. It's a temporary debris for the transition / the now, and then the long term is basically, if you look at waste energy, if we look at recycling reduction, if we look at shipping things off to address the reality as we live in a hurricane environment. This is all very nice in the perfect environment. One hurricane comes, and where do you put the stuff? And that's where the discussion is at now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Before you go, we do want to address some of the questions that are coming in online. Question to the Honorable Patrice Gumbs. Is there an effort outlined for the social factor to support the new waste management, as this is a cultural mindset shift?
So if I understand the question, it's basically, what are we doing to actually create this cultural shift? And actually, it's part of what I mentioned earlier. There's an entire program called Think Green. So Think Green is a massive part of the success of this project. It's everything from education to campaigns to competitions. We've already done a lot of initiatives with the Friend Side, for example. We focus a lot on, waste is not the government's problem, the waste is all of our problem. You're looking at things, for example, you're looking at things, for example, of campaigns in schools, like I indicated. Mr. Javois has an excellent program in terms of educating the youth. When I was a child, it was the whole slogan, take pride, don't throw it outside. The reality is that the only way to shift this is with the youth. My perception of waste and waste management, waste disposal is framed by that campaign. I'm 36 years old. So how do you keep that happening? You start with the youth. And the main focus of the campaign is first and foremost the youth. There's nothing worse than a child nagging a parent, don't do this, and the parent will follow. So a really key component of this is to get at children very young. We're also having discussions around, particularly with the French, around campaigns and competitions to stimulate ideas like the cleanest neighborhood, initiatives that we ourselves as leaders will go into the schools. And it's a simple thing of sort of, you have to look at this as, one, the mindset change of keeping clean, but also looking at the change of your waste has value and your waste is a commodity. Let's stop looking at waste and we throw away. How do we turn this into a business opportunity for Sint Maarten as a whole? There's a lot of opportunities in terms of recycling, reduction, composting. There's a lot of opportunities in terms of more technological things like waste energy. And that's where you have to have that discussion, because at the end of the day, it's a dollars and cents question. And if by basically having a cheaper, more efficient way of managing your waste, it may cost more in the short term, but in the long term, it actually pays large dividends to the population of this country. I think that's critical, really and truly, education and a business opportunity.
Thank you, Minister, for that response. To the gentleman.
Good evening, everyone. George Grayo, private enterprise. I do a lot of imports to the island, just like a lot of other businesses. So having solid data, import data, is very important for government policies and whatnot. And up to today, I haven't really heard of any, if there's any information out there. What is the state of that information that is available for the public to understand what's going on the market and whatnot? But that's not my main thing here. I want to talk about civic duties. The Think Green project you're talking about there, it's a great initiative. I applaud everyone for doing that. But we also have to make sure that the adults are also part of that equation, because you're finding situations out there that become a little exasperation. You're very familiar with, in my neighborhood, what goes on. There's a apartment building. You have a tenant that has no transportation and cannot bring his garbage all the way down to the entrance of Point Blanche into the Big Bin. So what he does is he puts it right there on the side of the road.
Thank you, Mr. Griot.
Excuse me, maybe I'd just like to add one thing to that. So we fully agree with you, but it's not only just going around doing inspections. We as a government, we also have to make sure that we also enable as well. Because I'll take examples of other neighborhoods where I know we have a community bin, a communal bin, that is probably way too small for the amount of houses that are actually there. Garbage hauler would come pick that bin up, and in a matter of maybe 2 to 3 hours is actually filled again. So it's not only about going around and just making sure that they're held accountable, but we also have to do our job. And we're doing that as part of this entire program as well, to also enable the facilities that are required in order to manage this in the right way. So I fully agree, but there's also more to it than just that.
Great question, George. I think one of the one of the opportunities that we have with the intervention that we're busy with is the fact that these issues can be addressed. And we also have the Asukuda system that was that I think the Ministry of TAT have to deal with the imports of product via the harbor. So, you know, as the minister indicated before, it takes all of government to address some of these problems. And because we are busy right now with these reforms, questions like that can be considered and solutions sought. So I think it's a very good idea to bring forward in terms of, you know, dealing with the imports.
Thank you. We stay on this side of the room to balance off the line a little bit more, and then we will come to you, ladies.
Good evening. My name is Claudius Boncampa. I don't really know if I'm still a civil servant or not, but that's beside the point. I have worked on the landfill for 20 plus years, and I listen to the stories that are being told today. I heard them in 2020. But one of the things that caught my eye was the expansion of the landfill and the ring dike. I don't think any consideration has been given with water passage. Look to the north of the landfill, to the arch road side. That's about 30 meters broad, and you want to take away 15 meters now with a ring dike. The water is not going to flow. You're going to get a dead pocket of water by the old salt mill. I think you all have to review that a minute and pay attention, because you can say, oh, I'm going to dredge it to get more water capacity. No, the water capacity is on the top. Once she fills, she fills. She's going to flood after that. So by losing 2%, we are now 2% below our minimum capacity that we have anchored down with TAUW Delft. So I just want to be careful with how we throw out certain things here that are not reality. I don't want to throw a black eye here, but we got to be honest though. Thank you.
Thank you for this addition. I do understand your concern. We did have a look at, you know, what options we would have when it comes to the ring dike, because it wasn't our preferred solution. However, unfortunately, landfilling on the old ring dike has, especially on the big side of the landfill, has made the slope so steep that if we would actually retract the ring dike, there would be a huge volume of material that needs to be moved backwards. And that's why it wasn't economically feasible to construct the ring dike anywhere else but in the Great Salt Pond. The actual measures needed to ensure the buffering capacity of the Great Salt Pond, they are still being calculated. So we will do have a model. I do know the IEC Delft, so Professor Zoran, I can contact him. I don't know if you know him yourself. Maybe we can have a brief discussion. I do know that he's been involved with Sint Maarten in 2017 as part of the Reconnect project. So we can see, maybe we can get some data from him and help that, use that information to make sure that the future situation is not worsening and stays within the limits. Hopefully that answers your question, and we can, after this meeting, we can maybe briefly discuss some technicalities.
Thank you. To the lady on this side.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nastasia. I'm a social worker, and I also work for EPIC, Perpetual Plastics by EPIC specifically. I actually do have two questions, but I'm not sure if it's allowed. One is quite short.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So one thing about the ring dike, and then after the finalization, so when the dump would be closed and green, would that then be a public area where people can walk, ride their bikes?
Can you ask your second question one time, please?
My second question is maybe a little bit more complicated and not one that's going to make a lot of people very happy. It's about the fact that we have to think about our import and what we are selling in our stores, so supermarkets and other shops, because a lot of them sell single-use plastics and other debris, garbage, that we have to now get rid of. And I think that's something very valuable that we need to consider if we want to move to a circular economy.
Thank you.
So maybe for the first question, I can be very brief. In the current design and ideas, the ring dike is not a public road. I'm not saying that it's not possible to implement that somehow in the future, but in the current design, it's not seen as a public road.
Yep, just let me add, I think one of the things I didn't mention in the presentation, but we're actually looking at is that around the world, a lot of landfills, there's a very famous one in Brooklyn, Chisholm Park, basically has become open to the public, and it's a walking space as well, something to be considering. We're also considering the fact that there's very little you can do or plant or build on landfills. The second option is also basically a full-fledged solar farm. Once you have the sediment settled and the coverage has, the closure has basically been settled and everything's okay, we are looking at the potential of creating a solar farm on top of the closed off landfill. And your second question was the imports. One of the things we're looking at, and something that happens even on the French side, there's a end user fee. So the idea is basically for certain things, let me actually begin by saying the government is working actually to now implement fully the single-use plastic ban. That's one. So that's something we're going to do and move forward with. But I think what's really important is the end user fee. Let's take cars, for example. One of my biggest struggles, car wrecks. Cars are imported, they're dropped off. Government has to basically pay to ship to basically get rid of that metal after. What happens on the French side and other places in the Caribbean too, when you buy something, like a fridge or a car, whatever, there's a built-in fee that is paid by the consumer, the purchaser, to basically handle that waste and have it disposed of. So we're looking at that as well in terms of introducing that legislation, and then we'll add something like an end user fee, that everybody, when they buy something, the actual disposal and handling of it, getting rid of it, processing of it, is already included in the fees and the product after. One, it helps to kind of handle very complicated material, particularly material that has a very slow or decay life, so lots of plastics, for example. You build that into the fee to sort of ensure you can actually handle it. But also I think it's the question about part of the bigger idea we spoke about is it's also our individual consumption patterns. What do we allow? When you go to the supermarket, for example, there's those plastic bags you put your fruit and vegetables in. We've been having discussions internally also with the French side as well. How do we come about a process of using reusable reusable bags to put your fruit and vegetables in? That in itself helps reduce the amount of things that come into the landfill in combination with an end user fee to help actually manage what you still have in your country.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are coming up towards the end of time, so I'm going to ask that the persons that are standing, you will get to ask your questions. We will ask at this time that no new persons join the line. We will have opportunities in future consultations in the future, and we will provide ways at the end that you can send a question if it wasn't available, Mr. We will find ways for you to ask additional questions. So with that, I move to the lady on this side.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Erna Mae Francis Cotton, visionary of Victorious Living Foundation. First, let me say congratulations to all the hard work that's being put in. And second, and most important, because I heard that you've done some research on the air quality, etc. My question is, have you done any in-depth research to find out if the landfill, the waste, the gases, if they have been impacting human life, as we've noticed an increase in cancer and all of these other types of illnesses? Has that been done? And if it hasn't, is there a plan to do so?
There is an REVM report from 2019 that was used as the basis of what I've shown you. That shows that there is air quality issues some of it associated with the landfill, but a lot of it also with actual exhaust gases from traffic, which is, of course, a big issue, especially in the small streets around it. I think that report is also available on the NRPB website. So if you want to go into that level of detail, I would suggest to go over that documentation, and that would hopefully answer your questions.
So you're saying that it was done and we have that information?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. On this side.
Good evening. My name is Norman Villarreal. My question is basically for the minister. Minister, you were speaking about the density of the population. With this population growth, I think Sint Maarten is #1 in the Caribbean and in the world #9, basically. So with the population growth, and with more people, we're gonna create more waste. So what exactly we're gonna do with this growth?
Yeah, so I think one of the key things is basically circular economy addresses this issue because there's not an infinite amount of space we have, particularly on a small island. The idea is basically you're going to continue to have growth, you're going to continue to have population growth, you're going to continue to have more houses, higher houses. We're even looking at, for example, the whole issue of zoning, what that means. Is it realistic? Is it not realistic? So we're going to have continuous growth in Sint Maarten because, again, our economy is driven by service industry. You need numbers to fuel this economy. The circular economy is the answer to that. It's basically recognizing that you're never gonna stop producing waste. Even when we reduce, recycle, burn it all, you're still going to have some amount of waste that's going to be left behind, but it's gonna be very, very minimal compared to what we currently have. In the time that I've been minister, which isn't very long, I've observed the landfill has grown exponentially within that very short period of time. Our population actually decreased since Hurricane Irma. So the reality is that it's only going to continue to grow up, and the circular economy is really the only way to make sure that whatever you do produce, you can keep on reusing as much as possible to actually limit how much you need to import and how much ends up in the landfill. It's pretty simple answer for a very complex story, but it's basically reuse, reuse, reuse as much as possible and limit how much you get rid of. And it's about our personal consumption patterns as well.
Thank you.
Sir?
Wow. Good evening, everyone.
Just let me add one more thing to this thing, and I think we mentioned it earlier, it's really the collaboration as well with the other islands that we are exploring possibilities that if we reach to the point where we aren't able to sort of store or manage our own amount of waste, these bilateral agreements, multilateral between us and other Caribbean countries can offer opportunities for handling waste jointly. So it's also something we're exploring as a solution for the amount of waste we have. Yeah.
Thank you, Minister. Sir?
Good evening again. Marco Watley, here as a representative of We Recycling. You just mentioned you haven't been minister for a long time. We've done a lot of research over the years. We've been here before on several occasions in this same setting, having conversations about recycling and studies and data, etc., etc., etc. Everyone in here has also now contributed to the landfill. There are at least 4 companies in here already active, trying to push and make recycling sustainable with their own funds. Several meetings have been had with government. To this point, we still standing with cans and sending everything we have to the landfill. I understand everything takes time. We got 25 years to go before this project is over. My question is, when will this new step moving forward begin? And what opportunities will there be for the local And I mean real opportunities. What opportunities will there be for these local entities? Perpetual Plastic, Mr. Javar with his project, and the many others, the guys that do the oil. What? Because there's no assistance, there's no help, nothing. We put in requests for funding, can't get it. We put in requests for land where we can operate at a minimal cost, because we know land and rent in Sint Maarten is very difficult to obtain and pay for. No assistance. In your project, you mentioned that there will be opportunities. How soon? Because I can guarantee you, within the next 2 to 3 years, these programs, these entities will not be able to continue operating with what they have. So my question is, yes, it sounds good. How realistic is it? And when will this begin? Thank you.
And you know, I really like the question for several reasons. The first reason is, never has there been an opportunity like this before, where political will, finance, and science have all been there at the same time. I think oftentimes you have funding available, political will has never been there. You've had political will, no money. This project actually offers the opportunity to accelerate movement towards exactly what you're talking about. Secondly, I think we spoke about it too, I mentioned it in my opening remarks. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. You know, a lot of people are doing things very much within a very small, very micro, very niche space. The role of, and I believe very strongly, the role of government is not supposed to be directly in waste management. We're supposed to see how we can support individuals, the businesses who have already been doing it at a smaller scale to become national. And that's where the money and the funding comes in. And this is why you have to have things like a tipping fee, a household contribution, because I can tell you the amount of money we currently have designated for waste management isn't enough. If we have to now add the layer of recycling, separation, composting, crushing, that all requires money. And the reality is the money is now there. And we also have a plan to make sure that we can actually fund whatever initiative people are doing at the grassroots level to make national. How quickly? It really depends on everyone in this room. I can announce tomorrow, everybody start sorting your stuff in your house. I have to make sure that I have the buy-in and support of everybody to actually get that done. Because the reality is a lot of people are doing programs like yourself, like green projects, Epic Perpetual Plastics. Is that something that the whole country is ready for? That's a question that we have to ask ourselves. People oftentimes like the idea of a clean Sint Maarten. They don't want to pay for it. And the reality is the part of this project is going to be the hardest is not the intervention. The intervention is going to come regardless. There will be movement on that landfill this time next year. The success of it depends on all of us realizing, one, this is where we have to go, and two, government putting the money where its mouth is. And it's going to happen.
I want to add to the minister's point, because obviously tonight is organized by NRPB. So anything that is considered adding to the waste or the dump is our responsibility, is my responsibility. And I will say, based on your observation, that this will not happen again at any one of our functions. We'll ensure that we think through what we are doing in terms of the catering, the packaging, and how we serve. And we'll ensure that, at least from our end, that small little negative impact, we will make sure that we don't continue that. Because we can't say something and do something else, and you're 100% right.
Sir, I'm going to ask that, I'm going to limit you to 1 or 2 quick sentences in your response, and then we will have to move on.
2 sentences. That was 1, sorry, okay. Perpetual plastic, just look at me. She tell me don't ever do this again, because now she's not going to get enough plastics. So, and then the next thing is, I need you guys to continue producing plastic so that I can continue operating. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm so sorry. I do want to say something because I'm one of the people who have who started Perpetual Plastics. So the cups that we got are type 5 plastic. We can actually recycle them. The bottle caps that you all have, we can recycle them. So if you want to help them
But that
out,
is exactly my point.
You
We
can
will
put
be
them-
more conscious in the product that
Yes,
we use
but
to
you could-
ensure that we are not adding.
you could actually leave them over here somewhere in a
And you'll
garbage
pick 'em
bag.
up.
I'll take them with me and I'll recycle these and the bottle caps.
Very good.
Thank you. Mr. Gumbs, you get to wrap us up
Oh, thank you.
in very short, succinct sentences, please.
Well, if my wife was here, she would have said, do not give him the microphone because he's addicted to microphones. But
Mika,
anyway,
please go stand next
I'll-
to your dad.
no, I'll be short. Thank you all for the presentation. I'm very happy to be here and to follow the development and to see how far this project has reached. I want to congratulate everybody involved, NRPB, the steering committee member, the technicians and everything. I have one question. I think the Claret would be probably the one to answer this the best way, maybe the minister. The engineers say that this project is a 6-year project. Is there anything built in that if by change of a government, this project stays on track? I want to know, is there from the World Bank or from NRPB something locked in that no matter, Joe Blow or Joe High or Joe Low or Joe Noisy or Mr. Boley or whoever comes in and say, we had enough of this, NRPB, World Bank, get over here. We don't like you all from the beginning. We don't like you now. We would not like you. Get out. Project stop. Is that a possibility? Or what is a commitment for the longevity for the 6 years for the completion of this dump project? Is it locked in?
Mr. Gumbs, thanks for the question to begin with. What has been communicated tonight, specifically in EDMP, is that there is money allocated. We have the expertise, we have the support from the government, and the commitment from within the trust fund, the steering committee. However, the trust fund ends in 2028. We are talking about 6 years. So we're talking going into 30, 31, 32. That will always be the case. The monies that has been allocated is fixed. I think the minister spoke about the disbursement conditions that needs to be met in order for the monies to be disbursed. But that is something that we work on daily and diligently, even to the point where, we become the thorn in government's side with, letters and reminders, et cetera, but that is just the reality of the situation. Regardless of whatever happens post 2028, the country is going to have to step up to the plate and take this into the future. The minister said just now that we have the political will. I think by the size of the audience and the presence of His Excellency, that this is not something that we are planning to take lightly. So the commitment is there by us, the commitment is there by you, the commitment is there by government, and I think if we focus on what we can achieve together, that regardless of the circumstances, in the areas of the things that we can control, we will accomplish the goal.
Thank you, Mr. Gumbs.
Thank you, Claret. You really graduated summa cum laude from the School of Diplomacy.
Minister, I'm going to ask actually that you step to the podium so you can give your remarks and your closing remarks at once.
No, okay, thank you very much, Giselle. And I think just to add to that, I don't think we can look, in terms of this project being, not linked to politics, the reality is we're at a point now, and I said it from the time I took office, we're at a point now, we're at the tipping point. Any government or any politician, any minister of Romy that comes in here and tells you that they're going to change this project, don't worry with the trust fund money, it's not going to happen, they're going to find alternative sources of funding. I dare anybody to find funding that is free at this level, the expertise that comes with it as well, from both local and international experts, it will never come again. We're actually the only country in the kingdom that has a financial injection when it comes to our waste management. So I think anybody who says, go away with this entire project, it's a waste of time, you have to be accountable to people at the end of the day. We have gotten to the point where we see the impact of unsustainable development, the impact of how we consume and how we dispose of things. We see the impact of a lot of things that have happened in the past. And, people did things according to how much they had at their disposal. I think a really good point in this presentation was, we're not doing too bad, but we need to do better, and we can do better. I think this project really is the only way that has married political will and finance together very wonderfully. And I think my objective in this term, however long it may be, ideally 4 years, is to get us to the point that any return to the norm, the old norm, is political suicide. And I think that's something really important to sort of give as a adding comment to Claret's comment as well. Just some brief closing remarks. I think I just want to briefly summarize how everyone focused on. We sort of began the evening looking at what the importance of the value of this evening is. And it began very nicely by saying, by Mr. Connor, this is really about engagement. This is not a collection of opinions. It's not a collection of feelings. This is really, for the very first time, science-based, evidence-based solutions to a problem that is multi-generational. But we end it today. And the reality is that the science now has to be accepted and appreciated and taken on board by the people. So the beginning part of this is engagement. And that's really an important part of this evening. Then I think in my own comments, I spoke very much about sustainability, how this is supposed to look at not necessarily addressing the problem we have today. The problem, of course, we all know is how the landfill looks, what it means to our tourism product, what it means to the quality of life, the air quality, the water quality. It's really about an effort about making it environmentally sustainable, but also making our whole entire waste management system sustainable financially and legally. One of the key points is as well, to Mr. Griot had the point about how do we enforce the waste ordinance. It's actually built into this entire project is a disbursement condition to create a waste ordinance that actually allows government to enforce its own rules. We can't currently do it now. So I think it's about sustainability, both in terms of environment, but also in terms of legal and also financial. Very big one, commodification. I think the whole entire point of sustainability of this entire project has to do with realizing the value of our waste. There's the element of, one, you can use a lot of these plastics and sort of other materials for art. You can scale it up. You can reuse them for aggregates. You can reuse them for new products. And it's even higher. You can actually look at it from a point of view of the end goal is this landfill could be a solar farm. This landfill could also be an issue about how we diversify our energy sources. Currently, we have a concession agreement where we have to have about 2% renewables. That's not being followed. So this is also a trajectory towards getting that sustainability and that sort of circularity going within our country and ensuring that everybody kind of buys into the idea of what we actually use is a long-term thing. It impacts all of us, but it also has a value. Then we had, the idea of the feasibility study, a landfill master plan, I think that's really critical in the sense of going back to what I said. This is really not feelings or opinions. This is really evidence-based. We need, of course, the support of everybody to make it a success. And this is exactly going back against, we're constantly linking every single part of this entire intervention, be it physical, be it the legislative, be it the financial, to making sure that everything is supported. The science must support the business and the politics. It can't be that the politics determines where this project goes. It's really based on science. And as a minister, it's my job to make sure that I translate the science into politically acceptable things that we can move forward with. So I think it's really about leading with the science and having it brought across by the people to be accepted. I think one of the key things we spoke about, and going back against this idea of sustainability, air quality, water quality, a large part of this project is going to be about enhancing the quality of life for all. That has to do, one, with the fact that we have a list of things called Sustainable Development Goals. In 2030, we're supposed to have a certain number of them achieved. This is a right step towards achieving those and ensuring that we have looked at development for a very long time as construction, more hotels, more cars, more money. But the reality is none of those things matter if the quality of life is subpar. And then I think one thing I want to also address is, and I think Alvaro brought it up quite nicely, is the amount of work that has gone into this entire trajectory and the amount of people that we have to really be thankful for their contribution. EDMP, as was stated, began as a response to Hurricane Irma to remove a couple of ships out of the lagoon. It evolved into fire suppression. And then someone said, you know what, why don't we look at a long-term solution for our landfill? We are now at the point where we're having that solution. And I think what's really beautiful about it is that this has really married local as well as international expertise. I think at times there's been a lot of struggles between communication, what everybody wants within the structure, be it the Dutch government, the Sint Maarten government, the World Bank, and NRPB. But I think what this has really proven is the dedication of all contributors and all players towards presenting something tonight, which we believe can be a strong solution towards our waste solution and our problems going forward. So to that, I really want to thank everybody who, even my predecessors, even the people who have come and gone with this project, who have gotten to this point as well. I think for them, a really big round of applause as well for all that you've done. And then I think what's a really nice way to add, and I think one of the concerns that there is now is the impact in terms of the water capacity, and of course the impact to the archaeological and heritage parts of this. So we are reducing, of course, an estimated 2% of the water capacity, but I'm really proud to announce at the same time we're also enhancing our water management capacity at the Ministry of Rummy. So it's actually one thing that we look at to say, okay, we have to make this loss. How do we use technology and science, and as well very generous donation of a subsidy from the Dutch government to actually enhance current water management capacities? Because in the end of the day, this all has to work simultaneously and together as well. So again, it goes back to the idea of strong partnerships and it taking all of us. With that, I want to thank everybody for coming out, having your voices be heard. There is, of course, the opportunity to have all your written responses sent to the email that's listed on the site. And of course, we have a couple of minutes after to exchange any ideas. I want to encourage everybody to really be a part of the discussions going forward. A lot of people are in here are already actively involved in waste management. We have some people who are already involved in waste management on the landfill who are currently here. Thank you all for being here. And I think what's really important is that everyone has to make this a success. It really takes all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. There is nothing that I can add that will enhance what the minister just said. So I will ask if we can all stand as we invite His Excellency, the Governor, to take his leave. Thank you so much, sir, for being here with us tonight. Ms. Bernadette as well, yes. Thank you for being with us, representing the French government. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again. Have a great evening further.